Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was a graduate student working part-time at a local bookstore, barely making ends meet but managing to cover my half of the rent for our small, two-bedroom apartment. The place wasn't much to look at, but it was affordable and close to campus. When my original roommate moved out halfway through the lease, I needed someone fast to help with expenses. That's when she responded to my online posting. She seemed normal enough during our brief meeting. Clean, quiet, said she was a nursing student who mostly kept to herself. I should have asked more questions, but I was desperate and she had first month's rent ready to go. The lease had my name on it, which meant all the utilities were in my name too, including the internet bill I've been paying for 2 years. The first few weeks were fine. She kept to her word about being quiet, and I barely saw her except for the occasional kitchen encounter. I thought I'd hit the roommate jackpot. Then something changed when she got comfortable. It started innocently enough. She'd use the living room TV in the evenings to play some online game called Overwatch. I didn't mind at first because I usually studied in my room anyway. But then the sessions got longer and louder, much louder. Every single night without fail, she'd plant herself on that couch at around 7 p.m. and wouldn't move until well past midnight. The living room became her personal gaming den, and I became a prisoner in my own bedroom. The worst part wasn't even that she hogged the TV. It was the constant screaming. Night after night I'd hear her yelling about using her ultimate ability, demanding to know where her team's tank was, and cursing about things being unfair. This went on for hours, every single night. I'd be trying to study for exams or just relax after a long day at work, and all I could hear was her shrieking about team compositions and something called payload. The walls in our apartment were thin, and her voice carried through the entire place. I tried talking to her about it diplomatically at first. I asked if she could keep it down after 10 p.m. since I had early classes. She promised it wouldn't be a problem, but nothing changed. If anything, she got louder. It was like she was deliberately trying to assert dominance over the shared space. She'd leave energy drink cans all over the coffee table, her gaming headset draped over the couch arm, controllers scattered everywhere. The living room stopped feeling like a shared space and became her personal arcade. After 2 weeks of this, I was at my breaking point. I tried being nice, I tried being direct, and I'd even tried passive-aggressive notes. Nothing worked. She'd just shrug and say she'd try to be quieter, then proceed to scream about flanking routes and cooldowns until 2 a.m. One particularly bad night, I was lying in bed trying to study for a major exam when she started having what sounded like a complete meltdown over her game. She was screaming about how broken the game was, yelling at someone named Steve not to leave, and complaining about playing with random people online. I snapped. I grabbed my phone and started Googling our internet provider, looking for any way to file a complaint or get them to do something about the connection during her gaming hours. That's when I discovered something beautiful in my account settings. Since the internet bill was in my name, I had full administrative access to our router. I could see every device connected to our network, monitor usage, and most importantly, I could control individual device access. I stared at my phone screen in amazement. There it was, her gaming console, clearly labeled and using a massive amount of bandwidth. And right next to it was a little toggle switch that said block device. I felt like I'd just discovered fire. I waited for the perfect moment. She was in the middle of what sounded like an intense match, and I could hear her coordinating with her team about some strategy. She told them she was going to tell a joke and then they'd push together. I held my finger over the disconnect button and listened when she started some story about a guy walking into a bowling alley wearing sandals. Right when she was getting to what sounded like the punchline, I pressed it. The sudden silence from the living room was deafening. Then I heard her fumbling with controllers. She delivered her terrible punchline about not going bowling in sandals and tried to get her teammates' attention, but nobody could hear her anymore. I had to bite my pillow to keep from laughing out loud. It was absolutely perfect timing. She'd been cut off right in the middle of delivering what was apparently the world's lamest joke. For the next few minutes, I could hear her trying to reconnect, restarting her console, unplugging and replugging cables. Eventually, she gave up and went to bed. I turned her connection back on once I was sure she was done for the night. The next morning, she mentioned the internet had been acting weird. When I asked about it, she said it had just died right in the middle of a match. I played dumb and suggested maybe it was a problem with her console. I even offered to call the provider and ask if they were doing any maintenance. Of course, I never called anyone, but I did discover something wonderful. I could access the router controls from anywhere using the mobile app. This opened up a whole new world of possibilities. The next night, she settled in for her usual gaming marathon. I waited until she was really getting into it, yelling about team compositions and abilities. Then I shut off her connection. She spent 20 minutes troubleshooting before giving up. The night after that, I waited until I heard her say she was about to use some special move, then cut her off right at the crucial moment. Each time she complained about the internet being unreliable, and each time I played the concerned roommate, I'd act confused and suggest she call the internet company, though I'd mention that there might be something wrong with the line. When she said she kept meaning to call, but it only happened when they were closed, I suggested they were probably doing maintenance during off-peak hours. I explained that would make sense why it only happened at night and why my connection was fine since I wasn't gaming. She bought it completely. I started getting creative with my timing. Sometimes I'd let her play for hours without interruption just to keep her off guard. Other times I'd disconnect her multiple times in one night. The randomness made it seem more like a genuine technical problem. Her loud gaming sessions became my entertainment. Instead of dreading her nightly routine, I started looking forward to it. I'd lie in bed with the router app open, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When she'd get really heated about some play or start trash-talking other players, that's when I'd pull the plug. Whenever she'd scream about how bad her teammates were or question how they even reached their current rank, I'd disconnect her right in the middle of her rant. She'd always sound confused and frustrated when the connection died. It never got old. About 3 weeks into my campaign of digital warfare, she started staying up even later trying to find times when the internet was stable. This backfired spectacularly because now I was controlling when she could and couldn't play. She'd try gaming at midnight, 1 a.m., even 2 a.m., thinking she could outsmart the mysterious connection issues. When I'd ask about the internet problems, she complained that it was getting worse and that she thought there was something seriously wrong with the line. I'd sympathize and suggest she should definitely call a company, though I'd mention how these companies usually just tell you to reset everything and charge you for a service call. She'd agree and say it was always fine during the day when she was at school. The final weeks of her lease were the most peaceful I'd had since she moved in. She'd given up on most of her late-night gaming sessions, convinced that our internet was fundamentally broken after 10 p.m. She started going to bed earlier, which meant I could actually study and sleep without listening to her screaming about payload objectives and team kills. When she finally moved out, she actually thanked me for being understanding about the internet problems. She apologized for the connection being so bad while she was there and hoped it would get better for me. I told her I was sure the internet company would figure it out eventually. After she left, I never had another internet problem again. Funny how that works. My spouse and I have been married for 5 years, and we host family gatherings. We love having everyone over, and since we got our house 2 years ago, it's become the default meeting spot for family events. My spouse's family lives about 3 hours away, so when they visit, it's usually for the whole weekend. Now, my spouse's sister has always been demanding. She's got 2 kids, ages 8 and 10, and she's one of those parents who thinks the world should revolve around her children's every need. I love those kids, but their mom has a way of making everything about them when she wants something. My spouse and I are careful with money. We're not broke, but we budget for everything. When we invite family over for dinner, especially at restaurants, it can get expensive fast. That's why I look for deals and coupons. It's just smart financial planning. So 2 weeks ago, the whole family came to visit. my spouse's parents, their sister, and her two kids. It was supposed to be a nice, relaxing day. I had planned some activities for the kids, including chalk art on our patio, which they loved. We served a light lunch with sandwiches and had plenty of snacks throughout the day. Everything was going perfectly until around 5:15 p.m. when dinner time started approaching. My sister-in-law stretched and looked at her watch, then announced that we should head down to the restaurant soon. I told her it was only 5:15 and that the dinner deals didn't start until 6 p.m., so we should wait another 45 minutes. She said she'd rather just go now because the kids were getting hungry. I explained that the kids had just had snacks an hour ago, and if we waited until 6, I had a great coupon that would bring our bill down from about $175 to under $75. Since we were paying for everyone, it would really help us save money. I thought this was reasonable. We had already offered to cover dinner for the whole family before they arrived, and saving $100 seemed like a no-brainer. 45 minutes isn't exactly a lifetime to wait, but my sister-in-law's face soured. She said it was fine and got up to walk over to where the kids were still working on their chalk art. I could see her talking to them, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. My spouse was chatting with their parents about work stuff, completely oblivious to the tension. About 5 minutes later, both kids came running onto the patio in the most dramatic fashion I've ever seen. They were clutching their stomachs like they were dying of starvation, wailing about how hungry they were and how their tummies hurt. They begged to know when we were eating and said they couldn't wait anymore. These are the same kids who had been happily drawing with chalk and munching on crackers just minutes before. Now they were suddenly acting like they hadn't eaten in days. It was so obviously orchestrated that I felt my blood pressure rising. My mother-in-law fell for it, gasping about how the poor babies were starving and saying we should just go now. My father-in-law agreed, saying we shouldn't make them wait and that it would be fine. I looked at my spouse, hoping for some backup. I said we could wait since it was only 45 minutes and we'd save a lot of money. But my sister-in-law was already getting the kids ready to leave, declaring that we were going now and telling the kids to go get their shoes. That's when I lost it. When the kids ran inside to get ready, I turned to face my sister-in-law directly and told her that using her children to emotionally manipulate people into getting her way was pathetic. The patio went dead silent. My spouse stopped mid-sentence with their parents. Everyone was staring at us. My sister-in-law demanded to know what I had just said. I repeated myself, telling her that those kids were fine 5 minutes ago. Then she talked to them, and suddenly they were starving and couldn't wait another 45 minutes. I called it manipulation and said it was pathetic. She snapped back that everyone was hungry and I should just get over it. She added that if I couldn't afford to pay for dinner, then I shouldn't have offered in the first place. I explained that this wasn't about not being able to afford it, but about being smart with money and not wasting $100 when we didn't have to. She shot back that maybe next time I shouldn't invite them over if I was going to be cheap about everything. My mother-in-law tried to calm things down, saying we shouldn't fight about this. My father-in-law suggested we could just split the bill if money was tight. I said that money wasn't tight and that I just didn't see why we should throw away $100 when all we had to do was wait 45 minutes. But my sister-in-law was already heading inside, announcing that they were leaving in 5 minutes, and anyone who wanted to come could come. My spouse looked at me and suggested that maybe we should just go because it wasn't worth the fight. But I was done. I had put effort into planning this day, bought all the food for lunch and snacks, set up activities for the kids, and now I was being treated like the bad guy for wanting to save money on a dinner I was paying for. I told them all to go ahead, that I'd stay home. My sister-in-law said that was perfect because there would be more room for the rest of them. And that's exactly what happened. My spouse ended up going with them to keep the peace, and I stayed home. They went to the restaurant, paid full price, and apparently had a lovely dinner without me. When my spouse came back later that night, they tried to smooth things over by saying she was just hangry, and that's how she gets. I told them that wasn't an excuse for manipulating her kids and then insulting me in my own home. The next morning at breakfast, my sister-in-law acted like nothing had happened. but I wasn't letting it slide. I said I thought we needed to clear the air about the night before. She replied that there was nothing to clear and that I was being ridiculous over a stupid coupon. I told her that she had used her children to manipulate the situation when she didn't get her way. She said that her children were genuinely hungry. I asked her if she supposed she had nothing to do with that sudden hunger that appeared right after I said we should wait. She didn't have an answer for that. The rest of the weekend was tense, but I didn't back down. Later, I found out from my spouse that their sister had been complaining to everyone about how cheap and controlling I was, but my spouse also admitted that they noticed how the kids' hunger seemed to appear out of nowhere too. A week later, my mother-in-law called to mediate. She suggested that maybe next time we should just order pizza or something simple instead of going to restaurants. I told her that wasn't the point. The point was that her daughter had manipulated the situation and then insulted me when I called her out on it. My mother-in-law said that her daughter was used to doing things her way. I told her that she wouldn't be doing things her way in my house anymore. I ended up posting about this whole situation online, and some people told me I was overreacting about sandwiches not being real food, and that I should have just catered the whole event. Since when did having family over require a full catering service? The real kicker came 2 weeks later when my sister-in-law called my spouse directly to ask if we wanted to go out to dinner again the next time they visited. My spouse asked about the timing, and she said it didn't matter when long, when we had one of those coupon things to help with the cost. When my spouse told me, I laughed. Apparently, saving money wasn't so pathetic after all. I'm legally blind without my glasses. I'm talking about the kind of vision where everything beyond 2 feet becomes a complete blur. These weren't just any glasses either. They were prescription progressive lenses that cost me nearly $800. My insurance only covered a small portion, so I had to save up for months to afford them. $800 might as well have been $8,000 for someone like me. The whole thing happened at the pharmacy section of a big box store. I was there picking up my monthly prescription when this woman approached me. She looked to be in her 40s, carrying an expensive purse. She was squinting at the medication labels on the shelf, holding them at arm's length like she was trying to make out the text. At first, I thought she might need help finding something, so I asked if she was okay. That's when things got weird. She complimented my glasses and asked where I got them. I thanked her and told her I got them at the eye clinic downtown, but explained they were prescription. Then she asked if she could try them on because she'd been having trouble seeing lately. I thought she was joking at first. Who asks to try on someone else's prescription glasses? I politely declined, explaining that they were prescription and wouldn't help her see better since they were specifically made for my vision problems. She got pushy then, calling me selfish and saying she just needed to see if they would work for her because she couldn't afford to go to the eye doctor right now. I tried to be understanding and suggested she see an eye doctor or maybe try some reading glasses from the pharmacy section, explaining again that prescription glasses only work for the person they're made for. That's when her whole demeanor changed. She stepped closer to me. She demanded I let her try them for just a second, asking what the big deal was. I explained that the big deal was they were mine, they were prescription, and I couldn't see without them. I told her I wasn't comfortable taking them off. She called me ridiculous and said she was sure I could see fine for a few minutes. I had to tell her that no, I really couldn't see without them because I was legally blind without my glasses. She accused me of being dramatic and said nobody was that blind. I was getting uncomfortable at this point, but I tried to stay polite. There were other customers around, and I didn't want to cause a scene. I apologized again but said I really couldn't help her, suggesting she ask the pharmacist about over-the-counter reading glasses. That's when she completely lost it. Before I could react, she reached out and grabbed my glasses right off my face. She declared that if I wouldn't let her try them, she would just take them. The world immediately became a complete blur. I could barely make out shapes and colors. I reached out desperately, trying to get my glasses back, telling her to give them back because I couldn't see. She exclaimed that they worked perfectly and were exactly what she needed. I begged her to understand that they were prescription and wouldn't work for her long term, pleading with her to give them back. I heard her moving around and I was stumbling, trying to follow the sound of her voice. Other customers were starting to notice the commotion. One customer asked what was going on. I called out that she had taken my glasses and I couldn't see without them. Karen rudely told everyone to mind their own business and claimed the glasses were hers now. That's when I heard the most horrible sound, the crunch of glass and metal being crushed. I couldn't see exactly what happened, but I heard several people gasp. One customer exclaimed in shock that she had just stepped on them, and another confirmed she had broken them on purpose. I dropped to my knees, feeling around on the floor for the pieces. I could feel the broken lenses and bent frame. I asked her why she would do that, explaining they had cost me $800 and asking how I was supposed to get home or work now. She coldly said that wasn't her problem and maybe next time I'd be more helpful. I heard footsteps moving away quickly. She was trying to leave. One customer yelled for someone to stop her because she couldn't just leave after doing that, and another said they were getting the manager. I was still on the floor trying to piece together what was left of my glasses when I heard a man's voice. The manager told her she needed to stop right there. She argued that it was none of his business and she was leaving. The manager said he had seen what happened, that she had destroyed someone's property and she wasn't going anywhere until they figured it out. She protested that he couldn't keep her there because she was a customer. He corrected her, saying he actually could because what she had done was destruction of property and possibly assault, and he was calling the police. She called the whole situation ridiculous, dismissing them as just glasses. I explained that I couldn't see anything without them, couldn't drive home, couldn't work, and asked if she had any idea how much they cost. One of the customers who had heard our earlier conversation confirmed it was $800. She said it wasn't her fault and that I should have just let her try them. The manager helped me to a chair and called the police. Several customers stayed to give statements about what they witnessed. Karen kept trying to leave, but the manager and a security guard blocked the exits. When the police arrived, they took statements from everyone. Karen tried to claim it was an accident, but multiple witnesses confirmed she had grabbed my glasses and intentionally stepped on them. The officer told her she was under arrest for destruction of property and theft. She protested about the theft charge, claiming she hadn't stolen anything. The officer explained that taking someone else's property without permission was theft, and destroying it afterward was a separate charge. She called the whole thing insane over a pair of glasses. The officer corrected her that it was over an $800 pair of glasses that she had stolen and destroyed. When they put the handcuffs on her, she kept protesting that it wasn't fair and that I should have just been more helpful. She actually had the nerve to say that if I had just let her try them on, none of this would have happened. The manager was incredibly helpful. He got me contact information for everyone who witnessed what happened, and the store's security cameras had captured the whole thing. He even called my emergency contact to come pick me up since I couldn't drive without my glasses. I pressed charges. The police report was filed, and Karen was charged with theft and destruction of property. The court case took a few months, but she was ordered to pay restitution for my glasses plus court costs. She ended up paying way more than $800 when you factor in her lawyer fees, court costs, and fines, all because she thought she was entitled to take something that didn't belong to her. I got my new glasses, and now I keep a backup pair at home. I work as a contractor for the Air Force. My job involves managing the computer systems and networks that keep everything running smoothly at our base. I got into this field after spending 4 years in the military myself, where I learned the basics of network administration. When I got out, I decided to stay in the same world but as a civilian contractor. My job is interesting because I handle both the regular computer networks and some specialized systems, including our voice over internet protocol phone system. Most people just call it the fancy phone system, but it does way more than regular phones. It handles emergency notifications, conference calls, call routing, and even records calls when needed for official business. The whole system runs on several servers that I maintain, and like most modern phone systems, it uses some programming languages to make everything work properly. One of those languages is Python, which I use to write scripts that automate call routing and manage all the advanced features that make our communication system actually useful. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I was drinking my coffee and checking emails when I got a notification from our security scanning system. These scans happen automatically and flag anything that might be a security risk on our computers. The alert said Python was detected on my work laptop and needed to be removed immediately. I wasn't too worried at first. I had documentation showing that Python was approved for use across the entire enterprise network. I knew at least 3 other Air Force sites were using it for similar purposes, but apparently our local site had its own rules that nobody had bothered to tell me about until now. The email came from Karen, our local cybersecurity officer. I'd dealt with her before and she had this way of making everything sound like a crisis even when it wasn't. She was one of those people who loved having authority and used it whenever possible. Karen sent me a message demanding that I remove Python from my systems immediately. She said it wasn't authorized for local use at this site and made it sound like I was breaking some major security rule. I replied back explaining that I had documentation showing Python was approved for the entire enterprise network. I asked her to clarify why it wasn't allowed here specifically since I had proof it was supposed to be okay. She responded by saying she didn't care what documentation I had. She told me our local policy prohibited it and that I needed to remove it from all devices I operated. She made it clear this wasn't a request but an order. I tried to explain that I needed Python for the phone system to work properly, but she cut me off with another message. She said she didn't want to hear excuses and threatened to escalate the issue to my supervisor if I didn't comply immediately. The whole conversation was happening through our official ticketing system, so everything was being documented automatically. I realized she wasn't going to listen to reason and frankly, I was getting tired of her attitude. She had this forceful personality that made arguing with her more trouble than it was worth. I sent back a simple message acknowledging her instructions. I told her I would immediately remove Python from all systems I operated per her directions. I figured the best way to handle this was to do exactly what she asked. I started with my laptop uninstalling Python and all the related tools I used for programming. Then I moved on to the servers that ran our phone system. Each server had Python installed because that's what powered all the advanced features that everyone took for granted. Server 1 went offline first. That handled our call trees, which automatically route calls to the right departments based on what number people dial. Server 2 was next. There went our teleconference capabilities and the ability to set up group calls. Server 3 managed our emergency notification system, which was supposed to automatically call all personnel if there was a base emergency. Within 30 minutes, our entire advanced phone system was down. People could still make basic calls between offices, but everything else just stopped working. The emergency notification system showed error messages. Conference rooms couldn't host calls with outside participants. Even our automated announcements that played hold music stopped working. My phone started ringing almost immediately. One of my colleagues called asking what was wrong with the phone system because they couldn't set up a conference call. I explained that Python had been removed from all systems per cybersecurity instructions, which meant the advanced features wouldn't work anymore. My colleague asked what I meant by Python being removed and who had authorized such a thing. I told them it was Karen from cybersecurity who said it wasn't allowed on any systems I operated. Within minutes, my supervisor was calling to ask about the status of the phone outage. I explained that Python had been removed from all servers per cybersecurity directive and that the voice over internet protocol system couldn't function without it. My supervisor asked why Python had been removed and why he wasn't consulted about this decision. I told him Karen had said it needed to be removed immediately from all devices I operated and that I had all the documentation in our ticket system. I forwarded him the entire conversation thread. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. My supervisor told me to reinstall Python on everything right away because they were making an exception for our systems. I acknowledged the order and told him it should take about an hour to get everything back online. But before I could even start the reinstallation process, Karen called me directly. Her tone was completely different now. She told me I needed to put Python back on the servers immediately. I asked her about her previous statement that Python wasn't authorized for local use. She said they were making an exception for critical systems. When I asked if that meant Python was now authorized, she told me to just put it back and not make things more complicated than they needed to be. About 20 minutes into the outage, the base commander's office had tried to use the emergency notification system to test their monthly communication drill. When it didn't work, they started asking questions up the chain of command about why critical communication systems were down. It took me about an hour to get everything back online. During that time, I got several more calls from different departments asking about their phone features. Each time, I politely explained that the software had been removed per cybersecurity instructions and would be restored as soon as I received authorization. The next day, I got an updated software inventory list that clearly showed Python is approved for use on communication servers. Funny how that worked out. My supervisor stopped by my office that afternoon and told me I had done a good job handling the situation. I simply said I was just following instructions. He mentioned that Karen had told him she might have been hasty with her directive. I replied that these things happen and at least now we had clear documentation about what software was actually approved. Karen stopped sending demanding emails after that and actually started asking questions about what different software was used for before making removal requests. My wife and I travel together when we can save up enough money. We're not rich, but we put aside cash throughout the year for one big trip. This year we picked Greece, specifically Santorini. It was our dream destination. And after working extra shifts for months, we finally made it happen. The trip to Santorini was amazing. 5 days of incredible sunsets, great food, and pure relaxation. But all good things must end. And soon we found ourselves at the airport getting ready for our flight back to Paris, where we'd catch our connection home. We were flying Transavia, which is basically the European version of Spirit Airlines. You know the deal? Everything costs extra, the seats are cramped, and you're grateful if you land in one piece. But here's the thing about budget airlines. If you're gonna fly them, you better pay for the upgrades that matter. That's exactly what we did. I paid an extra 60 euros for 2 exit row seats. Not just any seats, the aisle and middle seat in the exit row. These seats came with precious extra leg room and the bonus of earlier boarding. At 6'2", cramped airline seats are basically torture devices for me, so this upgrade was worth every penny. My wife has a small bladder, especially when she is nervous about flying, so naturally when our boarding group was called, she was in the bathroom. I waited for her because that's what you do when you're married, but after a few minutes I realized we were going to miss the early boarding benefit we'd paid for. When she came back, my wife apologized for making us late. I told her not to worry about it since we had assigned seats anyway. We finally made our way onto the plane, boarding passes in hand, ready to settle into our paid-for comfort. The plane was already about 3/4 full, which wasn't surprising since it was peak tourist season. I walked down the aisle, checking seat numbers, until I reached our row. And there she was, an American woman, probably in her 50s, sitting in my aisle seat like she owned the place. She had her bag in the middle seat and was completely sprawled out, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. I told her that I thought she was in my seat. I even held up my boarding pass thinking this would be a simple mistake to resolve. Without even looking up from her phone, she waved her hand and asked if I couldn't just sit in the empty seats across the aisle instead. She pointed toward the exit row on the other side. I looked over. Yes, those seats were currently empty, but that didn't mean they'd stay that way. More importantly, I'd paid for specific seats. I told her no and asked her to please move to her assigned seat. I kept my voice calm, though I could feel my patience starting to wear thin. Behind me, other passengers were trying to get to their seats, and we were creating a bottleneck. She brushed me off again, saying I should just sit anywhere because it wasn't a big deal. She still hadn't looked up from her phone. Not once. The complete dismissal was infuriating. I tried again, telling her that I had paid extra for this seat and needed her to move. At this point, people were starting to push past us, giving us annoyed looks. My wife squeezed by and took her middle seat, looking embarrassed by the whole situation. I stepped aside to let more passengers through, but Karen just sat there, completely unmoved. 10 more seconds passed, then 15. The line of passengers was backing up, people were getting frustrated, and this woman was acting like I was being unreasonable for wanting the seat I paid for. That's when I lost it. I told her loudly to get out of my seat or I'd have the flight attendant do it. I said it loud enough that several passengers turned to look. Karen finally looked up from her phone with this shocked expression like I'd just slapped her. She agreed to move but complained that I didn't need to be rude about it. She started making this huge show of gathering her things, huffing and puffing like she was the victim in this situation. I shot back that I wasn't rude until she decided to be an entitled jerk. Karen shot me a dirty look as she grabbed her oversized bag and started walking toward the back of the plane. I watched her go, curious to see where she'd end up. She walked all the way to the second to last row. The cheap seats. The seats with no leg room, no early boarding privileges, and no extra perks whatsoever. In other words, the seats she should have been sitting in all along. My wife said that the whole thing was quite something. I agreed, saying that some people just think the rules don't apply to them. When we settled into our seats, the seats we'd paid for, I watched the rest of the boarding process. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, passengers were filing into those exit row seats across the aisle that Karen had suggested we take. If we'd listened to her, we would have been the ones getting kicked out of seats we didn't belong in. The plane ended up being 95% full. Every single exit row seat was occupied. Karen would have known this if she'd bothered to look at her boarding pass or ask a flight attendant about switching seats properly. Instead, she decided to just take what she wanted and hope nobody would call her out on it. Unfortunately for her, she picked the wrong person to mess with. I don't mind confrontation when someone is clearly in the wrong, especially when I've paid good money for something. The flight to Paris was comfortable in our extra legroom seats. Karen, meanwhile, spent the 3-hour flight crammed into the back of the plane with her knees probably touching her chin. Every time I got up to use the bathroom, I could see her back there looking miserable. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.